Mahalo everyone, and welcome to the Jolly Scarecrows channel. You're with me, Joe, and today I have for you part of our spooky Halloween series, a brand new vampire deck. Now, vampires have kind of long been laughed at, and they've got a couple of bits of new support, which make them quite interesting and means you can do some really kind of decent enough opening plays. That you can put some negates on the board and you can really kind of disrupt things. They're no longer a kind of a meme deck. Obviously, they're not like super competitive, but there are hopefully like through this kind of deck profile and the video which should be running above you now. This should be showcasing the combo. Feel free to run it maybe on slow if you want to see it happening, and I'll try and explain it for you. So the kind of part of the key starters of the deck is the card I'm presenting for you now, the Vampire Ghost Ogre. So if you get it in your opening hand, and we're running it at 3, and then 3 Pot of Prosperity as well. Obviously, if you can't afford that, then you might maybe want the Extravagance. So yeah, Ghost Ogre. Normal summon it, send one other vampire card from your hand or face up on the field. So you do have to have another vampire card. We are running about 20 of them, so it's likely that you will have one. So you send one other, add one level 4 or higher to your hand, and then you can send a level 2 from your deck to the graveyard, a level 2 or lower. So the level 2 or lowers are the way you kind of generate your resources. They're your engine, and for that you have the really awful looking Retainer, and for me the much nicer looking Familiar. Both of them kind of do the same thing. If they're special summons, you can pay 500 life points to add either a vampire monster in the case of Familiar, or a vampire spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And then if they're in the graveyard, you can send a vampire card from your hand or face up the field to the graveyard, and you can special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. And the second part of that effect is actually quite important because you end up not being able to target themselves. It holds them back a little. So if you've used a Retainer, you've special summoned it to the field, you can't then use a Familiar in the graveyard and send the Retainer to the graveyard because it will banish itself. That's just a key point of contention, but usually there are plays around it. What you're wanting to do, and what you hopefully saw in the video, is you want to be adding a copy of Vampire's Domain, Vampire Territory, and Shadow Vampire. So Shadow Vampire lets you immediately special summon a dark vampire monster from your hand or deck. And kind of depending on your situation, you can make various different plays. So for example, Shadow Vampire, the one you are wanting to get, is Vampire Scarlet Scourge. So when this is either normal or special summoned, and this is kind of the key bit because most of the vampires revolve around normal summoning. Vampire Scarlet Scourge, this effect can activate when it's special summoned. So you pay 1,000 life points, special summon a vampire, but it can't attack this turn, and that is something to also bear in mind. You'll see later why that is, or I guess I can tell you now. Basically, to get the life points back, you have to pay a lot, and then you have to attack, inflict battle damage with your vampires to then gain the life points back through Vampire Territory. So it's important to note which of your vampires can and can't attack. Also, if you've used Unizombie, because sometimes, obviously, if you don't draw Vampire Ghost Ogre, a way of getting your vampire extenders, your engine, into the graveyard is through the 2 copies of Unizombie, and you can get those 2 copies from the 3 copies of Solitaire. So you're usually able to make a graveyard play in turn 1. You're usually able to start things going, and it will depend on kind of what you draw as to how kind of well the direction through which you play. It's really hard to keep this deck to 40 cards because you just kind of want more of anything. I'd be intrigued to see a 60-card vampire deck, to be honest, and if that was a bit more consistent in a way, but this is kept strictly to 40 cards. So, bang, your Scarlet Scourge lets you special summon a non-Scarlet Scourge from the graveyard. What you can is you can either use it to get an extender. So Familiar, if you haven't used its effects already, you can special summon it, and that lets you add a vampire from your deck to your hand. So a play you can do, and I think this was the exact one that's shown, is you can essentially use the effect of Shadow Vampire twice, because when Ghost Ogre is in the graveyard, you can banish it and get a free normal summon off. So essentially, you'll do your first normal summon will be for Ghost Ogre, your domain will be for your first Shadow Vampire, and your Ghost Ogre's second effect will be for your second Shadow Vampire. And both times you're able to, obviously with Shadow Vampire's effect, special summon a vampire from the deck. The first one you want will be Scarlet Scourge, the second one, ideally, will be Grace. So at this point you've got your 2 level 6s on the field, and Grace lets you classically select monster, spell, or trap and get rid of one of them, the kind of vampire lures type thing. Then you can go to rank 6 XEs, Beatrice, Lady the Eternal. You can pick, depending on kind of what you're playing, you can pick a Dragulis, you can even pick Sheridan. If you want a specific target of removal, I don't know if you've got, I think against Mystic 9 or something. There will be plays which you do that, but often you want to do Beatrice, and the reason you want to do Beatrice is because you want to keep detaching things to send cards from your deck to your graveyard. And the what you want to do is get rid of Necroworld Banshee. Necroworld Banshee will let you play your copy of Zombie World, and now things can start kicking, because you've got your setup, you've got your Zombie World, and you've got a bunch of monsters on the field. Now it's time to kind of wreak havoc with the extra deck, because that is pretty much how you start, and then everything else kind of flows from there. So there's various different directions you can take, and so I'll try and go through them now in terms of the nuances. Obviously, you've got your Uni-Zombie, and you can use that to kind of edit the levels of the things you have. We're running 2 synchros. We're running Baroness de Fleur. Obviously, there's targeted removal, and also can negate the activation of a card. So often it's quite nice to have that going into your opponent's turn. Sideframe Lord Omega, obviously brilliant card. Similarly, so I think this is level 10, this is level 9. So depending on your situation, they can be very useful. Often the play you'll be going into will be things like Vampire Sucker. So this, if you tribute for a tribute summon, you can tribute a zombie monster your opponent controls. So that can sometimes be very handy if you're going second, and you can then start these kind of combos without tributing your own vampires when you're going into your Shadow Vampire. And obviously that means you've got more monsters in the field to make more Link plays, or Xyz plays. So, your Vampire Sucker lets you target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to their field, and you get to draw a card, and it will become a zombie. What you can do from that is use Fascinator to special summon a monster from your opponent's graveyard to your side of the field, and then you contribute a vampire, so maybe Sucker, to target one of their monsters, take control of it, and then you can start looking at this, the Undead Vampire, which basically means that any monster your opponent owns that has a level, so a non-link, will be level 8. And you can quite quickly see how you get either 2 monsters your opponent controls, or you can get the 2 level 8s in the deck, Doom King, which obviously works really well with Zombie World, and that's kind of one of the reasons you want Zombie World so well, because this is just almost an everlasting negate. And I believe Yugioh Ban. No, Yugioh Ban might be level 7 actually. So your Doom King is really the one you're after. But often you can get a level 8. You can easily get 2 of your opponent's monsters to play the Undead Vampire, and this lets you mill 4 and special summon 1 essentially, which can work in your opponent's favour sometimes. So you do want to be a little bit careful with it, but yeah, a very good card for essentially making that kind of overextension play. So, links. We've not really gone into them much other than the Vampire Sucker. So we're playing a copy of Avenged Savior. This is a bit of not a cop-out card, but sometimes it can be useful just to use its second effect to send a zombie from your deck to the graveyard to make your opponent's monster lose attack. So often it can run over a monster, and then you've sent your Doom King to the graveyard, or you've sent a Mizuki, and that can maybe start something off, or a Frowman or whatever. Obviously, Hulk is in here because it works with Unizombie and Glow Up Bloom. Glow Up Bloom pretty much can search, all of your top boss monsters. So again, you really want that to go into the graveyard, and the deck's deliberately designed to get Zombie World out. So often you can immediately go in for a special summon. Sometimes you'll have these cards in your hand, and in which case it can be interesting to summon Barricade or Blocker. So discard one, and that can let you get back either a Zombie World from your graveyard if your opponent's destroyed it, or the all-important Domain. That's why we're only playing one of them, because it's quite easy to play Barricade Block. And you're easily able to bring the Domain or Territory back. And, this will hopefully prevent your opponent destroying it a little. Its other main thing is that this being a machine dark monster, and often you having the Vampire Sucker zombie, and often you can have something that isn't a zombie. I can't think of what that, maybe a Linkaribo or something. You can have Cyburst, Machine, and Zombie. Yeah, that's it. Cyburst, Machine, and Zombie with the Linkaribo, which you get off the Vampire Familiar. You can then immediately go into the Curious. And Curious obviously lets you send any card from your deck to the graveyard, and then the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So you can keep basically keep recycling all of the cards you want to be in the graveyard, and then when Curious goes, you can bring something back to your hand as well. What else is there to say? Let's see, it's quite a complicated deck compared to some of the ones we've had, but I think it works well. Obviously, things like Foolish Burial kind of speak for themselves in how good they are. Called by the Grave, similarly. Forbidden Droplet, fantastic card in the deck, because you're running quite a few monsters, and often they'll be quite dead in your hand. So you don't really want Necro. You don't want Necro Banshee. You don't want Mizuki, Doom King. There's a whole bunch of these you don't really want in the hand. So Forbidden Droplet works really well. So you can actually sometimes play well going second. For the go second version, I wouldn't recommend playing Vampire Domination. This is very much a go first card, and you can obviously side that out if you want. This is essentially, if you have a vampire monster, negate, and if it's a monster, you can gain some life points. So yeah, I'd swap that out for Ash maybe if you wanted to have this as a full go second version. But yeah, I find this very, very useful, obviously, as your kind of omni negate, and also because it's a vampire card, in a pinch you can discard it to start your combos off originally with the Familiar and the Retainer. Yes, I think I've covered nearly everything. I haven't covered the Crimson Knight Vampire Bram. You don't use that very often, but you can, obviously, if your opponent's got a cool boss monster, you can special summon it back from their graveyard, and yeah, that's a pretty decent card, and it's good when it destroys your opponent's monsters. There are cool effects of Grace and Frowlin, which I haven't mentioned yet. So Grace's effect is when you special summon level 5 or higher zombie from the effect of a zombie, you can special summon it from the graveyard by paying 2,000 life points. So often that can be where you essentially get a free level 6 often, and you can go into some of the odd XEs or some of the links because of that. It really kind of helps. Frowlin is your battle trap, essentially. So if your opponent declares attack, you can special summon it, and if you battle a zombie, you can pay life points to lower your opponent's monster's attack. So I mean, often you won't obviously get the chance to do that, and in practice, I haven't really used this card that often. But it works when a monster declares an attack, so you can attack your opponent's monster. Or you can attack your opponent directly or something, and then you can play Frowlin, and you'd almost and the effect works when it's in battle. So you can, I don't know, if you've got a Shadow Vampire and you want to get over a something like a Dragoon or something like that, you can pay the life points to knock it over, and then with your two kind of maybe useless vampires, these two level 5s, you can go into a Crimson Knight, or you can more commonly go into a vampire sucker. Because why wouldn't you do that? Right, I think that covers nearly all of this deck. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comments. And yeah, essentially, this is about as good as a vampire deck that I can conceive. But if you think there's anything different, then yeah, I'll be really intrigued to see it. There's plenty you can do with the extra deck and with the main deck. And obviously, there's a whole bunch of vampires. There's even this new one, Voidy. I tend to think it was really difficult to play. But it might be worth having it in there. Maybe in I don't know. But the thing is, I don't know what you'd replace, because I think it's all really nice as it is. But I leave that with you guys. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you in the next one. Sayonara.